And hello, golfers, and welcome to another episode of Making a Club Champion. In this episode, we talk about putting, and there's no better man to ask about this topic than Phil Kenyon. Phil was mentored by Harold Swash and is now the principal owner of the Harold Swash Putting School. Phil is a sought-after specialist putting coach that has worked with many of the world's leading players. Just to name a few, Rory McIlroy, Henrik Stenson, Justin Rose, Lee Westwood, Louis Oosthuizen, Martin Keimer, Thomas Bjorn, and Darren Clark. Phil makes me question even what I thought was my own strength, which was putting. Actually, that was something built on a belief rather than facts. And if you're looking to start working on your putting and turn it into a strength this upcoming season, then I think you'll find a lot of valuable actions to take away and work on in this episode. As ever, thank you so much for listening to Making a Club Champion, and enjoy this episode all about putting with Phil Kenyon.
Golf was my life. I didn't want to give it up, so I went to work.
Phil Kenyon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris.
So Phil, I believe your first putter, your in connection with putting was through Harold Swash, who was a good mate of was it your dad's?
Yeah, Harold was a sort of long-time friend of my father's.
Oh, fantastic! And you started working with him. Is that as you dropped out of professional golf as a player and sort of moved into the coaching side?
Yeah, I mean, I'd known Harold. Obviously, he's a friend of my dad. So growing up, when I got introduced to the game, I spent time around Harold, and at that time, I was kind of like just playing golf, and Harold was doing his thing, and he sort of coached me and helped me as a player. And then really it was later on in life, once I sort of realised that I wasn't going to make it as a playing professional, that I started to sort of work more closely with him, and that was sort of like the latter stages of his career. And that obviously gave me an opportunity and a leg up within sort of coaching, just sort of So that's how it came about, really. Yeah.
What were sort of like the main takeaways you learned from Harold, like in the early days when you were working with him as a coach?
I think Harold was like an engineer by trade, so he had a very sort of
he's the one from all is it the Yes putters and background?
Yeah, Harold designed the Yes C Group putter, which he's kind of probably more famous for. I mean, he worked for various other companies as a designer over the years. So he came into it from an engineering perspective. So, I mean, the one thing that sort of strikes me was that, like in more recent years, everyone sort of started to talk about the ball flight laws for the full swing and stuff like that. And, Harold kind of taught me from a very early age those ball flight laws and how they applied to putting. So for me, he was kind of very innovative, and he was ahead of his time in how he thought about putting, and he had the ability to think outside of the box. So he taught me a lot of like really what I would believe are key principles in terms of putting, which I think over time I've been able to add my own slant to and kind of develop more as a coach. But the underlying philosophy about putting, that's what I got from Harold.
And how has your philosophy changed on putting over time since working with Harold back in the day?
I think it's sort of, fair to say that Harold was probably a little bit more dogmatic than what I am. I mean, Harold sort of had certain very strong preferences which he liked, people to take on board. I try and be a little bit more flexible in terms of my approach. I think there's more, many different ways to sort of skin a cat. But there's certain things that you need to be able to do to be an effective putter. So, and my background's a little bit different in terms of, my education. I've sort of studied sports science, and in particular sort of sports psychology and motor learning and control. So I try and add some elements that I learned from that that avenue in terms of my approach. So, I think every coach has their own slant, don't they? And I guess I've gone off on certain tangents, but very much influenced by Harold and his work.
I've definitely noticed the theme of all of the sort of coaches I've had on the show, and the best ones seem to actually say less than sort of over delivering on value, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
they're always trying to let the student teach themselves rather than actually over deliver with information. Or I don't know if that's something you believe in as well. It sounds very similar to sort of, you're always getting the student almost to sort of speak rather than you as the coach, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think I see like a trend to being overly like that, and there's a phrase for it, isn't there? Whether it's like inside out coaching and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that's right at certain times. But sometimes the player's not going to find it themselves, and you have to tell them. So I think there's various approaches you can take to coaching, and it's finding the right one at the right time. I've seen coaches that have very much sort of rely on that philosophy, and at times I've seen them get nowhere. So because that's the player themselves can't find the answer or don't even relate to that approach. So I think it's important that players have ownership, but ownership doesn't necessarily mean that they discover it themselves. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's a balance to it for sure.
Well, I guess like with something like putting, as it's so individual, you couldn't keep a one fit size all method for every single player, right? Because it's such almost it's so individualized to the person that I guess you're always trying to bring out the best within the individual, maybe.
Well, you can teach everyone one method, and there are people that do that. It's whether you choose to or not. Like personally, I'd try and be adaptive to the player. I think there's many ways that you can do it, but certainly there are people that would take that approach.
Could you possibly give an example of perhaps two players you worked with and how different they are? You've managed to communicate what you're trying to do with them.
I think all the players I work with, they all put differently. The how they coordinate their movement is very different in terms of the different segments of the body. How they go about their routines, the certain patterns that they have. They're all different. So as a consequence, you have to try and work out what each player's issue is, and then work on that. It's not a case of going in and teaching everyone the same hand position, everyone the same posture, and everyone the same setup and same stroke concept, which is what a method teacher would essentially teach.
Right.
So it's understanding how that player moves and the consequence of that movement, and then how that fits into how he performs.
I think you sort of I picked up somewhere that you said there are 3 keys to putting. You start the ball on line, the speed control, and then reading the greens. Is there any one more important than the other on those 3?
No, I often hear sort of people debate the importance of each of those sort of skills, but the reality is I don't think you can really say one is more important than the other, because if you're significantly out in one of those skills, it's going to be really difficult for you to make putts. The key is that they match; those skills match, and you've got to have. I think any player needs to work on all of those 3 skills and work towards matching them. So no, I don't think one is more important than the other.
Okay.
It's a case of understanding your weaknesses in those 3 skills and having a plan to improve them and make sure they match.
Fantastic. And what could you possibly give us some examples or specific drills that you do for each one of those 3 sections?
Well, I think you can break those 3 skills down and you can do various drills for each of them. But the problem that you've got is if you break the skill down into its separate sort of components, is that it's isolated then. And yeah, you can improve that in isolation, but when you put that back into the performance or environment, then there's no say that that's actually then going to work. So I think it's important to try and develop those three skills together than actually isolate them. So you see, like, a lot of players will work on their technique on a straight put and spend a lot of time doing that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when they go and put on breaking puts or out on the golf course that they then put better.
Right.
So you've got to work on that aspect of your technique, which is going to control your start line. You've got to do that at the same time as developing your green reading and your speed control. So I think any drill that combines, or any way to practice that combines all three of them, is ultimately the best way to develop, because you're going to intuitively start to match those three in order to have success.
That makes sense. Okay, so and I think one of the is you have the sort of, is it the Visio bridges or which you putt through? Would that be a classic one which is sort of incorporating all three?
Yeah. So the putting gates.
The putting gates, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, it's a good drill in essence, because you've got to locate the putting gate. So these putting gates basically are just kind of metal frames that have various widths, and depending on where you put that gate on your line, it'll give you different degrees of error. So you've got to locate the putting gate on the correct line, and then once you've got that line, you've got to then be able to start the ball online through the gate, and then you've also got to sort of match it with the right speed. So you've got to really, those three skills have to match for you to have success. So I personally, as a coach, think it's a great drill because, like I say, all three skills, you're not isolating any one of them, and you've got to try and match them up to complete the task.
I suppose you could hit that putt in so many different ways as well, varying the speed, right? It, like, the line wouldn't always necessarily be right if the speed was different.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got different line and speed combinations, but the most important thing is they match, and they match in a way where you're picking fairly functional combinations. If you're picking really low lines that have to have like a ton of speed, then that's going to be difficult at times to make it successful. So there's always combinations that you can use. It's just making sure that they're going to work and they're functional.
So one could use that drill, but vary the speeds. It doesn't necessarily have to always.
I think I mean, I think there's a lot of people talk about being consistent in your speed, and a lot of people will use references for, the ball speed should the distance past the hole, the ball should always be foot past or 18 inches, whatever that is. Well, I think ultimately, like, what you find with elite players on a golf course, you've got different slopes and different green speeds. That the distance past the hole will vary depending on the putt type, and the distance past will vary just as a function of the entry speed. If you have the same entry speed into a hole, then that's going to run out different distances on different slopes. So I think a lot of people get tied into this notion of that the distance past must always be the same. And I think if you're going to develop great distance control or great touch, now, to me, I would actually try and train variability in that distance pass or variability in distance speed. If you've got the ability to hit the ball into the hole at different speeds at will, then by definition, I think you've got great touch. So if you were to use that drill, like the gate drill, and actually select different lines at different speeds, then I think you're developing good touch. And intuitively, if you're a player that tends to pick the line first before visualizing any speed, at least you've got a chance then of making sure that you match that speed to the line. So, that's why I think it's such a good drill.
Yeah. You sort of maybe have asked that question of maybe having a ball that always goes, say, 1 or 2 feet past. Are there any sort of beliefs or, say, bad recommendations you hear about putting which sort of make you sort of cringe inside, which you sort of maybe lean away from, that's notorious in the industry of short game?
Yeah, no, I think there's loads of fables and myths which, golfers latch on to and use as concepts which are really poor.
Okay.
There's a ton of them throughout the game, and in particular with putting, there's lots of myths that you see perpetuated for sure.
Are there any in particular you could give an example of?
Well, I think one of the common myth is that you need to accelerate the putter head for impact, and I think as a concept, a lot of amateur golfers then take that too far, and they have like too much acceleration, so it becomes quite difficult to control speed. And if you look at a lot of elite players, they have very, very little acceleration through impact. In fact, there are many really good putters that actually decelerate slightly. So that would be a common myth, that you have to accelerate through impact. I mean, the ball doesn't know acceleration. It only actually knows velocity. So as long as you can control the speed of the club head, then for me, it doesn't really matter whether you've accelerated or decelerated slightly.
Okay, absolutely. Are there any sort of statistics in putting that would sort of blow us away? Maybe like tour statistics, that you think are interesting to highlight?
I think probably the most mind-blowing stat out there is the fact that like 100% of putts that are short don't go in.
Right.
Sorry, my sense of humour.
No, I gotcha. It's fine.
I can't honestly say whether that. I mean, I think the average golfer now is quite sort of well informed, aren't they? At times with the internet, social media, and stuff like that.
I think I saw one the other day of it was Luke Donald in 2011. He had 535 putts from 3 feet and in, and he holed all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I would say, although we're reasonably well informed, and a lot of people would know that stat, and a lot of these stats are bandied about. I would say the average golfer, basically, their expectations, they believe that they should make a lot more putts from longer away than what they do, and they get the sense that the tour player holds a lot of putts from outside of 10 feet. When the reality, when you look at those stats, the average golfer a lot of time is shocked. Combined with that, they have a lack of appreciation how good the elite player is inside of 10 feet and how poor they are. They think they're better, I would say, in general inside 10 feet, and think they're a lot worse than what they are outside of 10 feet. So I think sometimes there's a skewed perception, whereas if the average golfer could be more educated in some of those stats, I think the level of expectation would change, particularly as they got further away from the hole.
Okay, absolutely. So I only just got your joke. It's a very hard job, this interviewing. You got all the questions and you trying to listen at the same time. What are the if someone could split putting into sort of mental and technically, what percentage would you split them if you could? How much do you think how much do you think that is?
I don't think you can you? It's a generalization. I mean, it's going to be different for every person. For some people it can be more of a mental challenge. For others it can be more of a technical challenge. But one thing's for sure. I don't care how good you are mentally. If you leave the club face 5 degrees open, the ball's going to start right. So there's got to be some level of competency with your technique. And then obviously you need a certain level of competency in your psychological approach. And at every level, then, either one of those factors could be differentiating, but it's hard to say putting is X amount mental and X amount physical. I mean, it's the mental aspect and the mental side of the game is not very tangible, is it? So how can you then quantify it's X amount part of the game? We just know that all of those aspects, technical, physical, mental, they're all linked, and they all affect performance.
So most of these questions sort of come from sort of the listeners. I've got a personal question. As a one handicapper myself, but I've developed this belief, and actually my putting is probably the best part of my game. But I've seemed to have developed this belief of, and I've done this for probably within the last 5 years, of never putting or never practicing my putting.
Yeah.
So I always, in fact, even when I play around a course, I'll just I'll play from tee to green, but I'll never hole out. But during a competition, I obviously have to putt. But that is a belief I've held strong to, and I don't know if that is mad on my end or is actually something I should practice my putting. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. There's only one question the only thing that I ever ask myself standing over a putt is do I believe this is going to go in? And I will keep readjusting over the ball until I'm happy with the answer is yes. So that is my putting philosophy, and I don't know if that's mad, if that or what your thoughts are.
So are you a good putter?
I am, yeah. I would rate myself as a good putter. Yeah, you're going to ask
on the basis of what, Chris?
Well, yeah. That is a good question. I can't now give you data. I probably miss. I probably miss around 8 to 9 greens around. So I'm making a lot of chips and a lot of putts. But yeah, you may have just answered that. I can't give you data on the answer. Yeah. So that may be a belief in itself.
It may be a belief in itself, doesn't we? All have strange and sometimes unfounded beliefs. Like a lot of people once believed that the world was flat. But so first of all, to answer your question, you don't know if you've got room for improvement, and you don't know if that approach is actually right for you. If you practice more, could you get better? More importantly, if you practice correctly, could you get better?
What metric could I give you then for that answer? What will you look just in terms of data to quantify my answer?
I think quite a good metric which a lot of golfers use now is a strokes gained metric, and although it's a comparison to PGA Tour players, so it putts gained, basically it compares you. So whatever distance you're putting from, it compares you to the average that it would take to get down from that distance on the PGA Tour. So if you'd have said to me, well, actually, Phil, I use putts gained and I average plus 0.5 per round, I'd said, bloody hell, Chris, that's pretty good. You'd probably be in the top 15 on the PGA Tour with that, and you're a one handicapper playing at your home club. So I'd say you're a very good putter. So that was the kind of idea. I mean, a lot of people have beliefs, but whether those beliefs are actually true or not, is a very different thing, isn't it? So
yeah, no, absolutely. So I guess would that be like a golf shots to hole would collect that sort of data, or some sort of data app? Not dating app.
Yeah, I think there's a few dating apps.
Get all of them for that.
There's a few different apps and stuff now out there which you can use to sort of collect stats on your round, and a lot of them are using this sort of strokes gain metric. I don't know the names of them off the top of my head, but I think it's readily accessible for the average golfer to do that, and as a consequence, you'll get some objective feedback on your level of performance. As I was saying before, the average golfer thinks they're a lot better inside 10 feet than what they are, and the opposite outside of 10 feet. But until you're actually measuring that and you've got some objective feedback, and it's not a subjective belief, then you can't really judge it, can you?
No. Okay, I'll collect some data and get back to you on that one, I think.
Okay.
You've mentioned in the past, maybe, I don't know if it's still true, but David Horsey and Matt Fitzpatrick are some of the best putters you worked with.
Yeah.
What small things do they do differently that separates them apart from everyone else?
I think they've got good technique, for one. They've got good technique, and they've worked on that over a period of time. They understand the technique. They understand, their own patterns. But I think also they have a very good strength of mind in a sense that they know how to go out and just hole putts. They don't get bogged down in technique. They both have the ability to train and then go out and trust. And from a skill perspective, they have a nice balance in those skills. They've got good techniques, so they can start the ball online. They can control their speed, but they're also, both of them are very good green readers. Okay. Intuitively, they're very good green readers. So there's, they're well balanced golfers, really, in that sense.
Mm. Would you say people are born good putters, like some people are born great drivers of the ball, or is it something they can really sort of develop themselves into becoming a great putter?
I think you can develop. It's not like you're trying to hit a drive 320 yards and you're going to be physically constrained, aren't you? So there's an element of genetics in. Mm-hmm. With putting, less so. There might be some genetics involved in terms of, hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness, things like that. But ultimately, a lot of the skills that you can acquire over time and practice. So, I don't think people are born great putters. They acquire that skill, or they don't acquire the skills over time. Obviously, the longer you're at it over time, and the less you've acquired the relevant skills, the harder it can be to get where you need to be. But most great putters have acquired the skill. Okay,
fantastic. This sort of question actually just come in. If someone putts well during a practice round, but doesn't sort of perform on, say, a Saturday medal at their home club, in the same sort of, in under pressure, how can one sort of best become better under pressure? I thought of actually the last guest we had on, which is Dave Allred, and sort of doing drills under pressure to become better at that. Maybe, I'm not sure. What do you think?
I thought you'd encourage them maybe not to practice.
Well, maybe, yeah. Just sit out, just believe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think how you structure your practice is important. I think it's very difficult to actually recreate the actual pressure that you perform under in practice. I don't think you ever do that. So maybe a little bit of a false notion to try and do that. But what I would say is that you practice in the same environment that you're going to try and play in. So when you go on the golf course, you never have the same putt twice. You're having different slopes, different angles, different distances on every putt. Mm-hmm. So if you're going on the putting green and finding one putt and then hitting 5 balls from that same position, that's not practice. So I would say, look at, first of all, if you're not transferring what you believe is your practice game to the golf course, are you practicing in a way that reflects the golf course? If you're not, then try practicing like that. And I think although your practice might drop off, your performance in practice might drop off in the short term, I think your ability to transfer that to the course in the long term will be better. But I don't think you will ever recreate the pressure that you have on the golf course. But you can certainly try and reflect the environment that you're trying to perform in when you're training. So I think that would be a key aspect of transfer, is variability of practice, trying to recreate the environment that you're in.
Fantastic. If someone has or someone come to you with the yips, or I suppose you don't even want to use that word, but what has actually happened there more on a physiological point of view? What are the first things one can do to get over them?
Yeah, I mean, the yips is a tough one, really. I don't think anyone really knows, where they truly start or the true phenomenon of what a yip is. There's research out there that sort of they indicate it's focal dystonia. I mean, what I would say from experience is, what I try and do as a coach is, when you have that player that comes and they have that pattern, is to try and find a way of breaking that pattern. And a lot of the times I think some yips actually develop from poor technique that require a lot of hand-eye coordination, and a lot of stress is placed on the micro movements to coordinate the club in the hands and arms. And over time, over pressure, as pressure builds up, there's a stress on the nervous system, and there's this kind of pattern is created. That's kind of one theory that I've sort of gravitated towards. So I think it's trying to break that pattern. So like you see a lot of guys now who will go and actually use very different grips than what they've used in the past.
Okay.
So like, a player has a yip. Well, it will always generally be in the dominant hand. So if you've got a right-handed golfer, then the yip will be in the right hand. I don't think I've ever seen a guy with a yip that's in the non-dominant hand.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So an immediate way to kind of battle someone who has a tremor in that dominant hand is to change the positioning of that hand. And I actually don't know why that works, but for a lot of people that works. And then also to get the technique in parameters where they're not placing a lot of stress on the hand-eye coordination. And then also you've got the other aspect of actually dealing with the nervous system and the anxiety that they may face. So it's kind of like a multi-pronged approach to relieve a lot of the symptoms. The root cause, it's really hard to get to the bottom of that one. And the cleverer people than I that I still don't really know what the root cause of a yip would be.
No, there was a Harold Swash clinic in Bristol, where I'm from, Hembury Golf Club.
Yeah.
And you went there, and I was taught with the lifelines. And when I was in college and playing at North Carolina, I felt my right hand was moving a little bit much, and I changed that to the claw to sort of soften that dominant hand. But that just naturally, it wasn't something I ever planned. It was just it just felt more natural at the time. Fantastic. What is a sort of day in the life for Phil Kenyon? What just from your weekly routine to when you arrive at a golf tournament to when you sort of hit the hay in the evening?
You mean when I'm at like a golf tournament?
Yeah, so when you're at like the Dunhill last week.
Day in the life.
Day in the life of Phil Kenyon.
No, well, up at 7, bottle of whiskey by 8, drive to the course. No, I mean, it's just, at a tournament, they're quite long days, I guess. So normally I'd be up and, breakfast by 7, make my way down to the course, normally down at the course before 8 o'clock. and then, depending on how many players I would have, I would try and sort of schedule times to catch up with each player during that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that some of the players are out on the golf course. I'll go out on the golf course with them, but I'll try and schedule times to meet up with the various players that I work with. And then a lot of the times they're quite busy days, so you'll grab like lunch on the go, or you might even sort of not get a chance to get lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And often, can be leaving the course, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and it's a case of head back, grab something to eat, shower, bed, and do the same again. So it's not really,
No,
it's not rock and roll by any chance, but I enjoy it, and it's nice to have the opportunity to work with, some of these, the best players in the world.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, my next question was how you best maintain your relationships with these guys on tour, as like everyone wants a piece of your time, and how you sort of best allocate that. Is that tough? Like everyone's sort of pulling you in different direction, or?
No, I mean, obviously you've only got so much time in the day, so there's only so many clients that you work with, so
Mm-hmm.
you have to limit the people that you can work with, and you just try and be fair to everybody and make sure that you see enough of them and service what they need. Sometimes it can be difficult, but other times it's not. So you just got to do your best to try and keep the players that you work with happy, and whatever that is, that's what you just try and do.
Mm. Is there a player that you see on tour that really sort of wows you by how hard they work at, maybe not just at their putting, but just everything they do, how they conduct their business and how they go about and handle themselves?
There's a lot of players like that, really. There's a lot of players who are really professional in their approach, guys I work with and guys that I don't. I think it would be unfair to mention any one in particular.
Mm.
But I think that the tour, they've got a lot of very, very professional people that go about their business. And as they should do, really. I mean, the athletes at the top of the profession.
Yeah.
You'd expect them to be professional. So there's a lot of guys who are really, really professional in their approach.
That's good. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time here. So, what do, perhaps some guy or one of your clients has not sort of performed well that week on the greens. What's that lesson look like after they finish? Perhaps they want to come and see you. How do you sort of best go about the sort of coaching method, or are they usually pretty chilled, or what does that look like?
Well, I guess the first thing you're trying to do is get a sense of where that performance is broke down. So, from a putting perspective, did they feel like they were executing the putts as they wanted to? If they had an issue with the start line, or was the speed out, or did they feel they're struggling reading green? He's trying to work out where that performance broke down, and then ultimately with every player, you have a plan with them. You have a sense of what their pattern is, and players will have a pattern. They'll tend to fall into the same things. So you're just trying to then identify, are they in the right parameters, so that they can perform. The thing is with golf, like any other sport, is like the outcome doesn't always match the process. So you can hit great putt and it doesn't go in.
Yeah.
So I think from a putting perspective, it can be quite difficult at times, because you really can't tell as to what the issue could be. You don't know if you've slightly pulled that, or the speed was slightly out, or it was a slight misread. It becomes very, very difficult. But a lot of times you can really hit all the right parameters, and the ball won't go in, takes a bobble, just doesn't take a break, it lips out. And from like emotionally, that can be quite difficult.
Mm.
So a lot of times with players, you're just trying to sort of decipher through that information and give them some clarity of what they need to do the following day,
right,
or the following week. And often that could be just, affirmation or confirmation of to keep doing the same thing. It might be a slight adjustment in the strategy, but a lot of time it can be the first thing. You just kind of going through the same things, and you go out the following day and you just roll the dice and see if it can get better. I think the easy thing is to make knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah,
I think that's a really easy thing to do with putting, because like I say, you can do all the right processes. You don't make any putts, and your playing partner, you see him making them from everywhere.
right.
And the easy thing to do is tinker.
Yeah.
And I think with putting, because there are so many individual variations and variety of things that you can do it well with, players definitely do have a tendency to want to tinker more so than the full swing, I would say, personally. So sometimes you can be there as the anti-tinkerer to stop them from tinkering and kind of keep them on task. So there'd be a lot more of that, I would say, than trying to find new solutions, is to keep them on task.
Fantastic. Now, all the listeners can take my advice on this and just believe that they are great putters, and you can just sit back and focus on the rest of the game. What percentage of time do you think someone should practice their putting?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it really just golfers aren't unlimited with their practice time, are they? Particularly recreational golfers, they're limited. And I would look at, how much you practice on each department of the game is really going to depend on what work you need in each department of the game. So if putting's a weakness, then you might want to spend more time on that. If putting's a strength, you might not practice as much. But if you look at like how much putting plays, at the percentage of putting, in terms of making up your overall performance, I think on tour, so between 20% on average and 35% of a PGA win. So your practice time should at least reflect that. From 20 to 35% of your practice time could be dedicated towards putting.
Okay, fantastic. Right, we'll start wrapping up with some rapid fire questions. These questions are sort of mainly about you and just getting to know a little bit more you and what sort of impacted your life, and how you've got to where you've got to be, working with some of the best golfers in the world. So what purchase of £100 or less has most positively impacted your life? So it could be outside of golf, it could be in golf.
My last pair of trainers.
Okay. And
I have a bit of a trainer fetish, so it keeps me happy.
Fantastic. I'm guessing you're in trainers all day, right?
No, golf shoes normally, trainers at night.
Right. I thought they would sort of mix you in with the caddies, only allow them to wear trainers.
No, I try and avoid mixing with caddies.
Well, you're speaking to one as well. No,
okay.
What kind of trainers were they?
They were a pair of Nike trainers, actually.
Do you remember the brand or specifics of them?
I've got them on now, so I'll have a little look.
Be careful of tearing your hamstring.
No, they're kind of like, I'm not quite sure what they were called, actually, but they're like some retro type Nike trainers. I like me retro trainers, so.
Okay.
And my wife keeps telling me that I've got too many and that I have a problem, but they keep me happy, and if I'm happy, then the
rest is covered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Phil Kenyon likes his retro trainers.
Yeah,
I may put that as the first quote on the show notes. What are 1 to 3 books that have greatly influenced your life? If you are a reader, if that's of course.
Yeah, if I'm a reader, I am a reader. Well, I think
that can be outside of golf as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, sure. I've read a lot of books that have had that I've enjoyed or had an impact on on me. But I guess biggest so there's a couple of books that I think which had a big impact on me and my interest in golf and my career and stuff. And when I was younger, I read all the Bob Rotella books.
Okay.
which really engaged me in like sports psychology and golf psychology. I read them originally when I was younger to sort of try and improve my own golf, and became really interested in that aspect of sports science. So, and it was influential in the choosing the course that I did at university. I think the Dave Peltz Putting Bible, that was a very influential book because it made me start to look at putting in a different way as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a kind of a lot more scientific in its approach to certain things. So that was a very influential book.
Was there any one in the Bob Rotella? Anyone in particular?
Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. I always remember reading that as a kid when it first came out, and it massively helped me with my own golf.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, I would say that one in particular.
Fantastic. Yeah,
I'm struggling to think of other stuff.
No, that's great.
But there'd be two that stand out, which are still on my shelf at home.
Yeah, Bob, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect was the first book our college coach in the States all gave us when we first arrived there.
Yeah,
I think it's a Bible for most golfers.
Yeah.
What new belief or habit most improved your life, say, in the last 3 to 5 years? Again, it can be outside of golf, this one.
What belief or habit?
These are deep questions.
What belief or habit? I think what belief or habit? One of the things that I think, like, one of the beliefs that I think's helped me is the fact that nobody knows everything, and to always to look at opportunities to learn, grow, get better. I think, like, when I first started to coach, I probably thought that I knew a lot more than what I do now. Where now I probably feel like I know a lot less and question a lot more.
Right.
So like that people talk like about growth mindsets and stuff like that. Well, I think I've always had it. I've always enjoyed learning, trying to be better. And I think, there'd be at times where that might be stronger or weaker. But I've always enjoyed learning, and I've always been open to learning and getting better. So as a belief system that there is something better out there, that you can get better, I think that's had a big impact for me, because I think it's enabled me to grow as a coach and get better as a coach.
Fantastic. Love it. Okay, last one. I know you've talked a bit about sort of becoming the best version of yourself. How would you define success?
Success in what?
Just in you and your life, I would say. How would you define success in terms of what you do?
In my life, or success in my profession?
You can do life if you like.
How would I define success in my life? Well,
we should have done this interview in the morning. These are such deep questions at the end of the day.
No, it's fine. I mean, basically, it doesn't revolve around golf. Okay,
great, awesome.
So, I mean, for me, it's like, what's important to me is my family, and I've got a baby boy who turns 1. So just to provide him the best opportunity and see him grow and develop as a good human, that would be success for me. That's all I can judge myself on, really. I would say that. Success as a coach, well, people will judge you on like the players that you work with or the success they have, but that's not necessarily your success. That's their success. And I think sometimes coaches get too much credit, and conversely, sometimes they get a little bit too much blame. And I see a lot of I come across a lot of great coaches that don't actually work with great players. You know, they could be doing a great job working at an academy where they're growing juniors, or they could just be servicing their members at the club. So for me, like, success as a coach would be to keep getting better and to feel like I actually improved my players, the more players I work with, the higher the ratio where I felt like they left as a better player. That would be success for me, and also to keep enjoying what I'm doing. That would be success as well, because I enjoy what I do. So I'd like to keep enjoying that, because I think if you enjoy it, that drives everything else. So
Fantastic.
I'd gauge success around on those elements.
Those are two very beautiful answers. That's very good. Okay, so the final question of this podcast is the action challenge. So each week we ask our guests something they believe in, which the listeners at home can try at home. And again, it can be golf related or non-golf related. So fire away.
Yeah. I would buy a pair of old school trainers once a month. I think it's liberating to cultivate a trainer collection. Other than that, from a putting perspective,
yeah,
as you mentioned before, you if you want to get feedback on your ability to be able to master those three skills, then a great drill, is the putting gate drill, where you get putting gate, or you could use 2 tee pegs randomly with one ball, walk round, read a putt, place the gate where you feel like you need to strike the ball through on your line, and then execute the putt. You're going to get feedback on your ability to start the ball on line, read the green, and then match the speed. So that's a great drill. And if you do that with a notion of trying to hit as many different putts as you can, then you might find it difficult to start with, but you'll very quickly have to learn to be able to adapt and find those appropriate skills to be successful. So it's challenging, but I think it's a great drill, and I try and encourage all the golfers I work with to do that, or have an element of that in their practice, because it'll give you really good feedback.
Fantastic. Oh, Philip, this has been absolutely awesome. Thoroughly enjoyed it. You have any sort of questions on my end to flip the interview the other way around?
No, not really, other than maybe if you started collecting some stats. You're obviously a good golfer, one handicap.
No, absolutely.
If you actually did find one of these apps and collect a little bit of data, you'd probably hopefully have a better appreciation as to whether your beliefs are true or not, and how good a putter you are. Yeah. And that might direct you in terms of how you can get better.
Absolutely. I feel like an overly confident golfer now with my putting just been crushed because I didn't give you a...
Well, no. I mean, that'd be the worst thing you could do as a coach, isn't it?
No, yeah, but I almost knew, I felt the answer, your question was coming on, give me a metric or data to give me that belief is true. And that sort of answered my own question. But that'll be one thing I do tonight, or certainly look into and implement and actually give you a number, hopefully in the future. Yeah,
no, I mean, listen, you don't want to be delusioned, do you? I mean,
no, you do not. No.
And you want confidence to be founded on. Well, I think if it's delusion confidence, then I don't think it's going to ultimately do you much good. You want a real deep founded belief that's based on good evidence, conditioned belief. So go and collect some stats.
Yeah, I'll do that. Well, thank you so much again. And where can people find you? Any websites, social media?
So I'm on Twitter under the handle of Swash Putting.
Okay.
We got 2 websites, haroldSwashPutting.co.uk, and the training aids that we've developed, they're available on visioputting.com.
Fantastic. And you teach at Harold Swash Putting. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have a studio that's based up at Thornby Hall in the northwest. So Harold Swash Putting School.
Fantastic. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll put all of these in the show notes, and so all the listeners can sort of dig in deep on everything we've talked about. And thank you so much again. This has been absolutely fantastic.
No problem. Cheers, Chris.
Cheers, Phil. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again for listening to Making a Club Champion podcast. If you love the show, don't forget to leave a review. If you want to take immediate action on what you just learned, head over to www.makingaclubchampion.com, where you'll receive your own personal action challenges from the latest guests, all of the show notes, strategic philosophies, and much, much more. If you want even more from the show, head over to Instagram at makingaclubchampion, where you'll receive lots of golden nuggets and gems and goodies. Until next time, thanks for listening.